This is the E-Free Lethbridge Podcast. Welcome to the E-Free Lethbridge Podcast. It's so great that you're joining us today. With us, we've got the Wonder Woman extraordinaire, Glenda Postman.
Good morning.
So nice and calm. Good morning.
I just don't like my title still. I'm trying not to resist it.
Well, people love the title. People love the title.
Okay. Good to know.
We also have the light at heart, Jeremy Light.
Nice.
Nice.
Good. I had to think about that one for a while. I'm your host, Levi, and we're going to kick things off with a fun morning question. So today's fun morning question: what's one of the worst pranks you've done that afterwards you think, oh man, maybe that was too much?
I can go first on this one. We pulled some pranks in college for sure. Bible college, that was sort of the prime pranking place, although a little bit at the church as well. But probably one that went too far was our resident assistant was going away with his girlfriend, I think, to her house, to her parents' place. And we decided that we were going to swap their half a room. So we got together with the girls' dorm. They brought all her stuff over to our dorm. We took all his stuff over to her dorm. And then we set up all her stuff in his dorm so that when they came back late at night, it would be like her half of the room had invaded his space. Yeah. And so a little bit of invasion of privacy probably along that line. But what we didn't know is that he was planning to propose to her. And so in one of the drawers was the ring. So he was really panicked about this because we took everything. So that went too far for sure. I think if it hadn't been for the ring, it would have just been on the edge, but that definitely
It was good. You were in line until the ring.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. You move all of her stuff over.
Not like the, not the underwear drawer or things like that.
Yeah. Okay, good.
We left those types of things. Yeah.
Everyone's concerned about.
Yeah. But the ring.
I could tell you a couple.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should. I'll just tell you one actually. I'll tell you about the Bible school days. So we were also in Bible school. I was at Briarcrest. We lived in Whitaker 3. And we thought it would be really funny because one girl was very into thinking about the rapture and end times and reading Left Behind and Frank Peretti. And so we thought, we should pretend that the rapture comes. So we set this whole thing up, and we had 33 girls, I think, that used one bathroom. And so we'd all be in there blow drying our hair and getting ready in the morning. And this girl would come in and shower at the same time. We'd kind of line up for showers. So we knew what time she showered. So we waited till she went in the shower. And then we literally dropped our robes, left our blow dryers on and swinging. And so there's clothes and puddles on the floor. And everybody was in except 2 girls. One was in the shower. And everybody was in on this. And then we just disappeared. And she got out of the shower. And I think we traumatized her for life. She got out of the shower and burst into tears. I guess ran down the hall crying, and we got in big trouble for that. But it went a little too far. But it was a really good idea. Maybe is this a bad idea? I don't know. We just thought.
I don't know how to answer that because I feel bad for the girl, but I really love the prank.
Yeah, you should have had that Larry Norman song playing.
We should have.
Just playing over I can just picture it over the tinny kind of intercom speakers Christ has come and you've been left behind. It
actually wasn't that hard to do, and everybody was in on it, and I apologize. I don't think that girl keeps in touch with me at all.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
Okay, so my story is last year on the missions trip, we have a thing where we always do a guy's sneak kind of thing, which I don't know, it started a while ago, that on missions trip, the guys will sneak out with the leaders, but the leaders totally plan it. They think that they're getting away with something, but it's all planned. Anyways, so bursting the bubble for some people. Anyways, we were going to do this to McDonald's, and the girls wanted in this time. So yeah, of course. And totally fine. So we were trying to figure out a way to make it seem like both could sneak out without the others knowing. And then the leaders were like, okay, we got to figure this out where we can actually like prank each other with it. And so I'm like, okay, like we got this. We have to think of an elaborate plan. And so we picked the night that we had to wake up at like 6 a.m. the next day. So that when we got back, I told everyone, you need to go to bed right now because it's an early morning. And yeah, so then the girls went right to bed. The guys went right to bed. I told the girls to just leave right after that. And then the guys would be playing it all cool because they have known the whole day that they're going to go that evening to McDonald's and sneak out. And so the girls they're doing their thing. They left. And then the guys are waiting till the girls are asleep enough to sneak out of the church and drive to McDonald's. Little do they know that I already know the girls are left, and that when they go to the parking lot, then they're going to see that the girls' vehicle is gone, and they're going to start questioning things. So then I'll say, oh man, they'll probably be at McDonald's. So that's where we're going to leave it. So what happened that I didn't know was that there was 2 girls on the mission trip, and we've been talking about integrity. We've been talking about all these things and so there's 2 girls that were like, we're not going.
We're not doing it.
No,
Aww.
Levi said to go to bed, and so we're going to bed.
Levi said, that's so cute. I hope you rewarded those girls.
So anyways, they finally convinced both of them, but they had to one of them, which was Nora Gartley, so the camps, like John and Melissa's daughter, she was like, I'm not going. Like, they had to tell her, it's okay, Levi has approved this. And she finally went. The other one, they peer pressured her into going. And so she goes. Now, the girls don't know that when the guys, so in this whole prank plan, I haven't told them that when we actually go, I am then going to prank the girls and get mad at them over the phone so that the guys think it's legit. So when we got in the car and then they said, well, where's the girl's vehicle? Then I pretended to be extremely mad about the situation. And so I told the guys, like, I'm going to phone them and pretend like I'm so mad and get mad at them so that they think this is all legit. So I tell them to put it on speakerphone, and I just start yelling and getting so mad at them, and that I'm going to be driving to that McDonald's, and at this point, that one girl who like, all the girls except for Nora who knows and the leaders who know are like freaking out, but the one girl who wanted to stay because of integrity is losing it. Like, she is losing it. And so I am like, I just write out, and I have no idea. And when we get there, she's in tears. There's girls hidden in the bathroom. Like, yeah, all this to finally just say, like, I'm joking. Let's just say that person was not impressed.
No.
I felt so bad. I was like,
no.
This is when you take things too long, like too far for the youth pastor. Oh, goodness.
Too far.
I think I can, as you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, there's tons of like similar situations where I wish I had done that different. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know.
It seemed like the perfect prank. And I was like, if everyone had the same like lightheartedness as me, then it would be like, it's not a scare prank. It's like, yeah, but people don't all have the same tolerance as I do, I guess. So,
oh my goodness.
But everyone has forgiven each other. We're all in a good place. So
good. Yeah. Glad to hear.
It's really good. Okay, guys, I think it's time to get to the message. So this week we were talking through Daniel chapter 7 to 12, one of the largest.
Just a little piece.
Just
a little piece of the Bible.
Bit. Just half
the book.
Yeah, half the book. And Jeremy was preaching. And so we've got Jeremy with us, which is something that we were thinking about doing for the rest of the summer. Although podcasts might look a little bit different through the summer, which just keep a heads up, it might look a little bit different. So Jeremy's here to have a conversation. Mark's on holidays. Luke's still on parental leave. So it's just the three of us. And we were talking about apocalyptic literature or media. That was kind of like a theme throughout your message. So I had a question for you guys. Are you guys in that category of people who are attracted to apocalyptic literature and media? And if so, what are you guys into?
No, I have never read a Left Behind book or literally nothing ever.
Wow.
Hunger Games?
I read the Hunger Games. Yeah, is that
That's
apocalyptic?
post-apocalyptic. Yeah, that's post-apocalyptic literature.
Yeah.
End of the world event happened, and then people are trying to
Yeah,
survive.
and see, I don't really love that. Even that, I don't really love. But I don't have a fascination with it. I have read Revelation and done Bible studies on it. That's as close as I would get. Studies on Daniel, but other than the Bible, hardly anything. Yeah. I don't have a fascination. I think because when I became a Christian, I probably would have worried about this. And so I was just like, I just don't want to have bad false information. So I don't know.
Okay.
I'm definitely, I'll preface this by saying I just like good stories in general. So wherever I can find a good story, I'm going to go there. And post-apocalyptic literature in particular, I find good stories. I didn't find, just cards on the table, I didn't find the Left Behind series particularly good storytelling. So I gave up after about book 2. There's like 14
How many are
more
there?
books. There's
What?
16 books in the series.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
But they got left behind, didn't they, after the first one? Oh, yeah.
I know. Well, and that was sort of like, I got to the end of the first one. I'm like, oh, they're just starting the tribulation now. Like, I don't
really?
have time.
Okay.
I don't have time to read
Didn't
this.
even.
Like, so kind of set it aside. But maybe the storytelling got better. But I didn't find it particularly compelling storytelling. But I'll go wherever there's good stories. So books, movies, TV series where they tell a really good story, I can totally be into. And I find post-apocalyptic literature compelling, or even apocalyptic kind of media compelling, because it sets up a really interesting problem, right? And so sometimes in the storytelling, they actually almost like, they don't deal with the problem very well. And I don't particularly love that. Like where they just kind of like almost, they set up this complicated scenario and then they just cut it. And you're like, oh, well, that was great. But if it's good storytelling, yeah, I'm into it for sure.
I like people who listen to this know that I don't really read books very often because I've said that before. But so Left Behind, that wasn't really my generation either. The movies were in my generation, but the books, that was like my dad's age.
Really? That's when it was. It was like our era.
Yeah. So I do know like Nicolas Cage had that remake. I have this weird thing where I watch cheesy apocalyptic end of the world movies and absolutely love it. So anytime it's
Really?
like so absurd that like, so I would put the Nick Cage Left Behind in that category of a movie that I watched and I was like, I know this is so terrible, but I'm loving every minute of it. Yeah, like Sharknado. Like,
yes, I was going to ask about that.
Oh
I'm
man,
I'm not
all
into
of them. That's awful. Oh my.
yeah, like
Why?
I like those. I especially like. So I've got one of my fears in life is like natural disasters, but some reason I love watching like extreme natural disaster movies.
Really?
And
Like
so,
The Day After Tomorrow? Is that a
yeah,
movie?
like The Day After Tomorrow.
Like I have no interest in watching that at all.
Oh yeah, I love those. So
Armageddon.
that's like, yeah, like
no
these
desire.
are just good movies of end of the world kind of like times. There's like a Netflix series that just came out about people like if they touch the sunlight, then the sunlight kills them, and so they're on a plane and they have to like constantly fly around the world and keep getting gas in the night. And so like stuff like that, just like how do you think of it? I don't know, but it amazes me. I mean, I play Fortnite and I never really thought about it as a post-apocalyptic like storyline until that was mentioned in the sermon. So I'm like, oh yeah, I guess like it does constantly revolve around the world ending.
I don't even know what Fortnite looks like.
Oh,
well,
I showed you a picture.
Like, really, that hamburger is Fortnite?
that's part of it.
I'm picturing forts and knights.
No, it's like 2 weeks. Fortnite, like Fortnite. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. I'd say I'm in the category of being attracted to it, but I don't have a mind where I'm like constantly thinking about the apocalypse or anything. I just think the movies are funny. I mean, there's like zombie stuff and it's okay, but whatever.
Even like a lot of the fascination, like, or discussion that was like, what are you? Are you pre-millennial? Are you, but like even that kind of discussion.
Yeah.
Don't know if I've had, I mean, it was a part of our era, but I just remember thinking like, well, we know some things about God that are true and for sure. So the supposition is maybe not appealing to me. I don't know.
Well, and I think for me, like I grew up in a very dispensational sort of mindset, right? And that might be part of the era, but also part of the subculture of Christianity that I grew up in. And I remember guys coming to our meetings with like charts of, you know, the end times and the different dispensations and a pretty certain interpretation of what the different beasts, particularly more in Revelation, I think, what they represent or what political entities or religious entities they represented and what was going to happen when and where. And so I think as I grew up and in that, so that's sort of the basis for that. And after every time somebody would kind of speak those messages, I probably invited Jesus into my heart again, just so I wouldn't get left behind. Because there was an element of fear in that, and
for sure,
there's some scariness to it, and that's an element of good storytelling, anyways, is to create some of that tension. But then, as I got exposed to other ideas of like this one interpretation of this literature, there are others of biblical apocalyptic literature or how the end times will come about. And as I got exposed to some of the different ideas, both at Bible college and beyond that, started really thinking about what does this look like for me. And I would say like what I've experienced personally, I've maybe seen mirrored a little bit in the church, or what's happening in the church broadly is being mirrored in me personally, is that we were so certain about some things and then they didn't happen as we thought they were. And now we're a little gun shy, or I'm a little gun shy to kind of talk about some of those end time things because I don't know. And I've burned is too strong a word, but I'm careful about the certainty that surrounds some of those predictions and prophecies.
Yeah, definitely. So apocalyptic thinking and COVID has been a topic that has been throughout this season that we've been in. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, lots of people ask that. Lots of people ask, do you think this is the end of the world? I'm like, yes, but I've actually thought that my whole life. And I think people have thought that since Jesus, like since the resurrection. So I think that is the end. These are the last days and have been for a couple thousand years. So, but I don't have any specific leanings because of COVID in this. I think we have been in the last days. I think it's cyclical, not linear. And that time, I guess I just don't spend energy trying to figure that out, maybe.
Do you mean cyclical in the sense of there's been like these mass movements or disturbances, I guess, in history throughout our history, but there's still a linear piece to this in terms of like God's directing it towards his ultimate purpose.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I can't imagine going through the world wars and not thinking this has got to be the end. I mean, they have a person who wants to take over the world and is killing people. Like, how would you not think that's the end? So I think we've thought that in our history, cyclically,
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I think every generation has had, I would assume every generation has had things that would point them towards believing that this is this is the end of the world. This is the end of history, the beginning of, when Jesus will come back and set up his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that expectation, you can see it in Paul's writing, as early as the New Testament era, that he was living with this expectation that Christ's return was imminent because he was reading what was happening in the world at the time. And
Nero, right? They had Nero.
Yeah, and the Roman Empire in general. So I actually really appreciated, I looked at the Bible Project's video on Daniel, and they talked about, here's kind of three main interpretations in terms of this, the cycle of beasts and kingdoms that come up. And, one of them is that it's referring to Antiochus. Another is that it's referring to the Roman Empire. Another is that it's referring to a kingdom yet to come. And their take is it's probably both. It's probably all of those to some level, because Daniel gives direction and comfort to every generation, and there's this constant rising and falling of little horns that brag, even into our era as well. So I take comfort from that. So is COVID the end of the world? It might be. We don't know for certain. And again, I think I've learned from, making these certain predictions that we don't know.
Well, and really the answer is yes, as all of our lives are, and every day that we live is moving towards the end of the world. Yes.
Yeah. Or moving towards the beginning of his kingdom here.
Yeah. Totally.
Maybe a better
good way to look at it.
Yeah. Jeremy, you talked about two patterns and one promise. The first pattern is that kingdoms become beasts when we refuse to acknowledge God as king. What ways do you see yourself in the images of the beasts or little horns?
Yeah.
I think you even asked the question, what beasts in Babylon have you given your allegiance to?
Yeah, and that's something like I keep trying to evaluate in my life, is because I talk about walking the third way as well. And walking the third way is really difficult, because sometimes you react to where the main Christian culture is and saying, no, that's an allegiance to a beast. That's an allegiance to a philosophy or a political system that is not the kingdom of God. And so, but in reacting to that, I can find myself aligning with another, swerving to the opposite ditch, and align with another beast. So some of the things that I thought of right away is, for me personally, is I believe in a God or a religious system that says if you have people's approval, you are good. And so that's really a beast. So that's defining what is good is by what other people think about you, and what is bad is when people think bad about you. And so that's a system that I give allegiance to, and that I have to watch myself, that I don't allow my life to be consumed with following that system of right and wrong.
I think too, it's a little bit like, I remember we used to do international Christmas camps for years. That's what we did for Christmas. So we took international students to the mountains and went camping and stayed at a camp, and we would go horseback riding all the time. And I remember there was this guy, and his saddle was a little bit loose, and he literally would be riding along. He'd be like, Glenda, and he'd be sideways on his horse. And then we'd go and sit him up, and thinking he just couldn't hold on right. And then we'd look back and he's falling over the other way. So we'd put him on his horse again. And then we realized the saddle's loose. And so sometimes that reminds me, like when our saddle is a little loose, then we just slip side to side. And so we need to be corrected. We need the authority of the word. We need to hear from God. Like all these things correct us and keep us upright. But it's so easy to lean. So I can lean into a really narrow-minded, conservative mindset, like, oh, just do these things and you'll be good, right? Like just check off these boxes. And I can also lean into a like really liberal mindset. And so I just find myself like having to correct. It's almost like a graph. If you have a graph and you just get off a little bit and you're still going in the same direction, then pretty soon you're off like this much. And so you need the word and you need people to correct you and keep you kind of in line. And one example I have that is if this is bad, you can cut it out, Levi. Bad example, but one example of that is I was talking to somebody about like kind of pro-life and what that meant, and I was actually really bothered by this, what felt like a lack of love for women who were really struggling in this time. And so I'm like thinking, if you're pro-life, like aren't you pro their life too? But I actually did get reminded, and I feel like kind of corrected, but actually that baby's life also matters. So I was like, oh, see, I have gone more liberal in my thinking on this, and I've forgotten this. And so I felt like I needed to kind of remember, actually, I am pro lives and pro people mattering. So I felt a little corrected by that.
You're pro both people mattering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the, like, this again is where the community plays a really important role. And sometimes the danger is to assume, like, because the community of faith has, you know, to use the saddle analogy again, Glenda, like leaned this way, that to help bring it back, I need to lean this way, but I need to be really careful that actually, like, setting that guy, if he's leaning to the left, setting him so he's leaning to the right isn't actually helping him.
I know.
Right?
I know. But we think that, so we think that about culture, and we think that about the church. So in culture, like, you want to also, like, you don't want to fall fully that way either. But, and so you tend to kind of like overcorrect. And in the church, I find, like, you'd say, okay, but really, like, are you giving thought to this woman? And in the world, you're saying, are you giving thought to this child? Like, it's interesting to stay on the horse in the middle.
The second pattern that you mentioned was that all beastly kingdoms fall. How do we manage the difference between a more karma-like philosophy and the justice of God?
Man, I've been thinking about this because I just took a class on the retribution of God. Does it have a leg to stand on? Is this idea, especially like a book like Proverbs, so it was a wisdom literature class, and it was talking about a book like Proverbs that says, look, the good will prosper and the evil will perish. And then in this book comes books like Ecclesiastes and Job, which are saying, I mean, Ecclesiastes is saying, life is short. This is all going to end. God's going to do what he wants. So eat, drink, and be merry. That's kind of what that guy's saying. And then you have like Job, who's saying, actually, he was upright, and yet all this calamity befalls on you. So it's interesting because I don't think you can throw out divine retribution or this idea that we get paid back with what's due, because ultimately we do. So you can't throw it out, but it isn't, I mean, Job teaches us it isn't the simple mathematical formula that we can figure out.
Yeah, and I think that's the key for me is that formulaic piece. So Larry Crabbe wrote in the book The Pressure's Off, which was super helpful to me. I think it's been re-released under a different title, but talked about that linear relationship that we often have of, like, if you do good things will happen. If you do bad things will happen. And so if something bad happens in your life or something that you judge as bad, it means that you haven't been good enough. And so the pressure's on you to be better. And that God doesn't work in that linear relationship. Grace takes that linear relationship out. But I think when it comes to kingdoms, there's not that linear relationship, but there's also justice. And so how do we navigate that tension? And what's interesting in Daniel in particular is in the first vision in Daniel chapter 7 of the 4 beasts, after the 4th beast arises and God's kingdom comes, when the Ancient of Days takes his throne, the other 3 beasts are allowed to live, but without authority. So there's this sense of, like, they're allowed to participate in God's kingdom, the first 3, in some way. So there's this like, it's just a sentence. So I don't want to, like, give too much interpretation to it, but there's something happening there that speaks of grace and not just annihilation or whatever kind of that piece of that. So yeah, that's the tension I think we find ourselves as Christians in. What I would say again is, like, let's be slow to point to something and say, this is God's judgment. This is happening because of this. You really need to be discerning and careful about using those kinds of words. And really the the hope of Daniel is that, someday, well, Daniel gets a peek behind the curtain, that someday the justice of God will be fully revealed. And then we'll know more fully what was his justice, what was his grace. Yeah,
I think we have to be very careful with that topic. I know in my own life I've seen that play out wrongly, and I've felt hurt by things in my own life, even sickness. I have Crohn's, and I remember a leader that I really looked up to at one point during the H1N1 pandemic. Because of my Crohn's, I have a very low immune system. And so I actually got H1N1. And when you have the flu and you have Crohn's, everything kind of mixes together. And anyways, I was in the hospital, and I had to go home for like a week from Bible college. And I remember one of my leaders I really looked up to told my parents that this was God's justice in my life for some sin that I had. And not only did my parents ring them out, but I just remember feeling very hurt because I don't know, it messed with my understanding of God's grace. And while it could be God's justice in my life, it could be, but I believe to stand in the place where I know that God has grace for some of the things that I've done in my life, and I've been forgiven for those things. So anyways, I just think we need to be careful, especially how we address it in other people's lives.
Well, and really the justness of God is in your life in the fact that you receive mercy. And that is just because that price has been paid. And so I think that's bad theology. Like, in his justice, you are justified. You are reconciled to God. The price has been paid. And when he looks on you, he sees Jesus too. So I think that that is important. Does he discipline and let us experience consequence? And but like, as far as his justice, that is his justice, that grace. And
I mean, Job really confronts that whole piece, right? Like these were Job's friends saying, it goes, for me, it goes back to that Larry Crabbe formula. Bad things have happened to you, Job. Therefore, you must have done something bad. That's essentially the same thing that we're saying when we look at our world or look at somebody's life and say, this is going on in your life. According to my formula, this means you must have done something bad in your life, which then on the flip side, is an arrogant well, first of all, puts us in the place of God to make these judgments, but arrogant statement that because my life is not as bad as yours, I'm a better person. That's really where we kind of stand on those things. So,
so Daniel was upright. We see that throughout the whole book. Yet he offers a prayer of confession, saying, "We have sinned and rebelled." He places himself right in the middle, like he's almost like unified in the culture and takes like ownership of it. So what does that look like for us today? Do we take that ownership of what's going on? Do we confess for, like, I'm not saying that we're as upright as Daniel, but what does that look like for us?
It's not very culturally thought of, I would say. Like, I thought that was an interesting point, Jer. And I think you're right. I think so much of scripture is written like collectively that we take so individual, such an individualized society, but it's not very culturally spoken, even in the church.
Well, and I think for sure, like Daniel would have been more from a kind of a group mindset culture, right? Where their identity was their community and their family and their nation, and we are much more individualistic than that. But it's still striking to me that and maybe because of the individualistic culture that I live in and am a part of, looking back on Daniel's words, where he just puts himself in the middle of the community and recognizes this is part of his identity. And I think there is something to learn from that. So again, I mean, we talked about like navigating between God's justice or like judgment and his grace. There's again this place of like not taking ownership of things that we shouldn't own. But this is part of the conversation we're having society wide in terms of racism and things like that, right? Like one of the pushbacks that I see online and it causes me to get a little bit of ire up, but is like, well, like nobody today in America has been owned by anybody else, and nobody has owned a slave. So like, why are we talking about this? No, collectively, we're part of a system that has perpetuated this, and to recognize the systems that are in place that not only, yes, that I benefit from, but also consciously and unconsciously perpetuate. And so to recognize that I have a part to play in my culture, in my society becoming peaceless, defining what's right, defining what's good, defining what's evil, and that I have a place to play in that. So just when Daniel prayed that prayer, it gave me an opportunity to just pause for a moment and say, like, am I just pointing out what's wrong with everybody else, or am I willing to acknowledge that I have something to do with this? I'm part of this.
Man, that comment that you just said, not your comment, not your words, but what you were quoting per se, that just fired me up.
Yeah.
I think that maybe I'm gonna fire up other people by my comments here, but I think that's one of the side effects of ultra conservatism. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Where people fight for the individualist, like, well, it's my right, it's my, like, everything's about you, and there's no collective, like, well, I shouldn't be in trouble for the fact that they're doing that. And yeah, that's just so backwards. Like, we have to own it. Like, yeah, I'm not a policeman and I'm not brutally attacking someone, but I have to own that because that's part of the culture that I'm a part of. Like, and I'm not a pimp that owns a whole bunch of women as sex slaves, but I have to like own that part of our culture so that it can get better. And slavery does exist. Sorry, I just fired up.
Yeah. Well, and like even a while ago, this was a long time ago, like a few years, and where it did a bit of an analysis of like, what did you own, what do you spend your money on, and then kind of did a calculation, like, this is how much slave labor goes into propping up my lifestyle, and in terms of clothing that I purchase or goods that I purchase. And I think, again, because I live a privileged lifestyle, I can just ignore that. I don't see it. It's not up front and central. But Daniel's prayer again just caused me to like, okay, hold on a minute. What do I own in this? And even things like capitalism, that perpetual economic growth is good. That is the good. That's what governments get evaluated by, right? So is the economy good? Have they grown the economy? Then they must be doing a good job. Is that actually good? Or is that ultimate good? And just trying to, and in what ways do I contribute to that definition of good? It gives us an opportunity just to pause for a minute and evaluate some of the systems that we participate in.
This is the last one. We're going to wrap things up after this, but how do we live in Babylon? You mentioned that we should be seeking for the peace and goodness of the community. And what does that look like? Like, how do we live in Babylon? What kind of hope does it bring that God will reign? What's your guys' thoughts on that?
I thought it was a really good balance of the pressure that shapes us, right? This idea that like we can embrace and support like our culture that we live in, or we can kind of rebel against that. And that Daniel actually found another way that wasn't necessarily only adoption accommodation, but to give Caesar what belongs to him, give God what is due to him. I thought that was a really good point. It made me really pause and think, where do I give thanks to? And yeah.
I have to give full credit to the Bible Project video on being in exile.
I
some of those
love the Bible. I love everything. The Bible Project, their videos are so good. I watched something on justice the other day. It was amazing. But I watched the Daniel one too. It was really good.
Yeah. So they have one on Daniel and then one on being in exile. I think they have a couple on being in exile.
Okay.
And so some of those ideas definitely influenced and shaped what I was thinking about. But yeah, this third way of not mere accommodation and not just rebellion. Like if it, I remember when I was in Bible college, one of the speakers talked about how the grace of God permeates everything, and the evil of sin permeates everything in our creation. And so this again goes to where we think of these dichotomies of all good and all bad. And so if it comes from Babylon, therefore it must automatically be bad, is the resistance way of thinking. Or if it comes from Babylon, it must automatically be good and accommodated to, is the adoption way of thinking. And the third
but Daniel didn't think that, right? Like he didn't think everything is bad. He was in exile and he was like, okay, well, we're eating this food. Well, he can ask for something different, but some things he just didn't revolt against. He went along with, he sought the peace and prosperity of the place he was planted in.
Yeah. And that's the tension, is like, how do we know when to, like, how do we recognize what's good and what we can get behind? How do we recognize what we have to point out as sin? And even it's interesting if you look, I think it's in Daniel 10, maybe one of the later visions, he's fasting from rich food. So it seems like at the beginning of the book, he resists and eats only vegetables and water. But by the end of his life, he's decided that he can give in to this cultural piece and have rich foods and wine. It talks about him fasting from that for a period of time. So it's not, he walks this road of like, again, like that for this time I should not eat this. The best thing for me to do right now is to fast from this rich food, out of mourning, out of prayer or whatever. Yet that isn't a constant thing in his life that he avoids. Even one of my profs in seminary talked about, like, we hold up Daniel as this example, this great example of purity in the midst of Babylon, which is great, and we should. But Esther was living in exile around the same time, and her accommodation to culture looked different, and her righteousness looked a little different than Daniel. She participated in like the modern equivalent of The Bachelor. It's like who will the king pick, and was part of a harem, and at her uncle's advice, and this was how God used her, and so they're navigating this tension of like, how do we accommodate to the dominant culture, and how do we point out its idolatry and its sinfulness? And the only way to do that is to follow Jesus, which is really easy to say, but not simple to do.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your heart. And Jeremy, thanks for being with us. It's so great to have a better insight into what went into the message. And yeah, every week I learn so much more just by discussing it. And so I encourage you, if you're listening, to find some people to discuss the message with, because you'll get so much more out of it if you do that. It's time to move to On the Lighter Side.
On the lighter side.
So today's On the Lighter Side is, what does a summer look like for you guys? Will you guys get some rest? Has COVID changed all of your plans? People have been asking me this lately. What does summer look like for you?
Well, for us, we early on, when the announcement was originally made that essentially the gatherings of 15 people were going to be the norm all through the summer, and that major festivals were being canceled and campgrounds would not be open, we just made this mental adjustment that we would be home for the summer. So we actually, the one that really got our family was that camp would not be running as normal. Our kids wouldn't be going to SABC. So we had a time of mourning. We took pieces of paper and wrote down everything we didn't think we'd be able to do in the summer anymore. Took them out into our backyard and burned them in a campfire, and then went back inside and dreamed up all the things that we could do. So backyard camping, and do a week of like campfire or camping food and those types of things, and trying to like make sure that we engage in the opportunities that summer gives us. So things have opened up a little bit since then, and it's been another adjustment for us now to be like, okay, so now what do we do? Exactly. I think we're mainly going to try to just go, not make another big adjustment in our plans, and do most of the stuff from home. So I'll take some vacation time. We may do some day trips, might float down the Old Man River, those types of things. We talked about maybe doing a weekly destination, so traveling somewhere in the world, but by staying home, but cooking food from that part of the world and learning a little bit about it. So trying to find some like stay-at-home adventures to do. Yeah.
Did I ever tell you about when our kids grew up? I really want our kids to be really culturally aware. This might be a side note, but I really want to be very culturally aware. So I was very conscientious as a parent to like do that, like cook food. So once a month every month we had a theme of a country, and so we cook food from that country. We tried to have someone over from that country. My mother-in-law worked with international students, so it wasn't difficult, and learn a few words from that culture and a little bit about it. And so I was telling the kids one day, I'm like, yeah, and remember we saw that bulletin board? They're like, what? I'm like, the bulletin board that taught you to love people. They don't have one recollection. Not one.
Oh.
Can we just have a moment of silence for my bulletin board?
Yeah.
I worked really hard on this. This just goes to show you kids don't learn from what you try to teach them, but they just absorb who you are. So they said, we remember having lots of international people around, but no, we don't remember that. I had to pull out a picture to show them that I did this board. But anyway, good luck with that, Cher. Your kids are older. They'll probably remember. But because really, that's what you want. You want to create memories and things. So COVID is kind of sucking the joy of some things in summer, especially swimming. Why swimming? Suddenly I'm like, well, now I must go swimming. I know you got a pool, Jer. You're winning.
Yeah, we did. That was one of the adjustments we made. If we can't go, we'll build a backyard.
Yeah, that's perfect. But we did buy a trailer this week, so I figure this is the summer to camp a little bit. So, and campgrounds weren't open for a long time, but now that they are, and you can hardly buy a trailer, so we got a trailer. So I'm looking forward. I think I have 3 days off this summer, but it'll be great.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that we're just right in the middle of the grieving our holiday loss. I've been putting it off because I'm not currently on holidays, but I've got a few different long weekends planned throughout the summer, but my wife is on holidays for the next 3 weeks, and this is usually a time when we go to BC, and that's where our family's from. We don't have any family in Lethbridge, so we're just like, I don't know, me in particular, I'm just missing that. Like, yeah, I was supposed to be on the road this weekend, and
are you gonna go, Levi?
We don't know. We don't want to use the public bathrooms all the way there, and we've got a 1.5-year-old, one and a half, however you want to say it, 18-month-old child. It's just not the most fun thing. Like,
yeah, drive through the middle of the night.
Yeah, we're like looking for
porta potty on the way.
We're looking for an RV that's like a small RV that someone would lend us or rent to us, that we could drive to BC and then have a bathroom available, and we can do as much pit stops as we need.
It's a good idea.
It's all contained, and so we don't have to eat out. We don't have to. Yeah. So yeah, we haven't found that yet, but so we're still thinking about it, but we might not.
Okay.
So we'll see. Yeah, it's hard. I wish there was a book that's like, these are all the fun things that you can do with a 1.5-year-old during COVID in Lethbridge. That'd be perfect.
Somebody should write that book.
Yeah, I should write that book.
Staycations.
This weekend we were like searching the internet, like, is there a place in Lethbridge that has animals that we can like take Ivor to see the animals? And like,
Yes.
where?
Well, just outside of Lethbridge, like on the way to Raymond, there's a little farm out there, Gentle Giant Acres.
Okay,
and you can go out there and you can just go visit all the animals. You can even do a horse ride. Hey, you can rent the ponies to come to your neighborhood or the animals. That's what we did for Ella's birthday party. We rented the bunnies and the ferrets. It was great.
So maybe we'll have to do that. I know Birds of Prey is not open right now. And so he likes that thing, like something that you can look at, but like we've been to almost every park in Lethbridge. I don't know what else to do. So we're like, we bought a little kiddie pool for him, I guess staycation, but yeah, I don't know. We'll make it work. I'll get rest.
Maybe we'll get some comments like on, things to do with 1.5-year-olds, and then you can compile them and take the credit. You can be the author, the editor of the book. Yeah.
I'll edit. Yeah. If anyone has things for a 1.5-year-old family for summer, let us know.
People are gonna say,
message
survive.
Us, email me.
You survive.
With
the 1.5-year-old.
Email
summer.
me if you have an RV that's small that you don't mind lending out or renting. Let me know. But yeah, I don't know.
Outhouses. That's what you should do in the way. Outhouses. Nobody's using those. Nobody wants to go in those. Nobody touches anything in them. You'll be fine. Just go find outhouses. They're so clean right now.
I just
seems like the worst advice ever.
The world is upside down. It might be the worst advice.
It's like post-apocalyptic to bring it back into this.
I need a sanitation gun to spray it down before I go in.
I'm telling you, nobody's using those things.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
Trucks are still going. Truckers are still going everywhere. And
they're not going to campgrounds to use the porta potty or the outhouse. They're going to Timmy's.
And I feel like with with campgrounds being open, like there's nothing else to do this summer, so people are just flocking to campgrounds.
Yeah.
So
I will let you know.
Yeah, and especially like BC just opened their campgrounds for people in BC.
In BC only, though.
Yeah. Provincial. I mean, the private ones have been open. My parents go camping like every weekend.
Okay.
So I'm sure they're being utilized quite heavily. Heavy
Actually,
loads.
you can't, in BC, you can't even book a public campground. So with an Alberta plate,
So yeah, it's gonna be quite the summer. But anyways.
I'm going to invent a vehicle for you. I might have to build it out of Lego, but it would be a prototype.
What about a camping potty? Just get a camping potty. What could go wrong with that in the back of the van?
What could go wrong?
Can you just make sure you have a video
At that
going
point, you
all
might
the
as well
time?
everyone should just have adult diapers. And
Yes!
Also.
Wait, I feel like this is quickly spiraling.
Welcome to the podcast, Jared. This is what happens on the podcast. It spirals all the time.
I believe I have relatives that traveled across Canada with a camping potty with a little toddler in it, and it did not go well.
Oh, I was going to say, see, it's possible. No, it didn't go well. Oh,
it didn't go well. No.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, it has been so great chatting with you guys. Before we go, I want to say Happy Canada Day. That's what's the video, or this video, and then our podcast is going to be released on Canada Day. So Happy Canada Day.
Happy
so
Canada
great
Day.
To celebrate with you. Most likely it's going to be raining and we'll all be inside. Kind of sad, but Happy Canada Day. All right. See you guys later. See you next week.
See you, everyone.
See you, everyone.